Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and it's time to take a look at all the great strategic and tactical games slated for release over the course of the year. As always, I'll be releasing 2 videos to kick the year off. This one featuring 4X, real-time strategy, turn-based tactics, and other such games, with a follow-up coming soon focused on city builders, sim, and management-style games instead. Remember that if you see something you like in this video, the best way to support the developers is to wishlist the game on Steam. Not only does that help indie developers in particular because of how visibility works on the platform, but it's an easy way for you to stay up to date with the game on the lead up to its release too. Otherwise, if you enjoy this video and find something you like the look of, please don't hesitate to hit the like button. There are timestamps down below to skip around if you'd like as always, and if you want to keep up with the games I highlight in this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel too. Before we begin, I do want to mention quickly that outside of this channel, I am affiliated with the publisher Hooded Horse. This affiliation is not a sponsorship, and I'm not paid to talk about their games in any of my videos or anything like that, but I like mentioning this affiliation anytime I'm going to cover their games, just in the interest of transparency. You can learn more about this affiliation in the video I've linked in the description below, but ultimately, the reason I started working with the folks at Hooded Horse was because they were scooping up my most anticipated games on a regular basis, and I continue to help them scout games too, so it only makes sense that some of their games will show up on my channel and in videos like this from time to time. Anyway, with all that said and with no more time to waste, let's begin. Heart of the Machine is releasing on the 31st of January, blending 4X gameplay with RPG elements and a heavy but extremely open-ended narrative approach. You play as the world's first sentient AI in the distant future, born into a decrepit city ruled by corporate overlords and PMCs, and this is definitely one of those games where there's more going on than first meets the eye. As you come into existence on a procedurally generated city map, you know very little of the world around you, but you know that only you truly have the power to impact any kind of meaningful change. How you go about doing so and what that change is depends entirely on you. Will you simply look for a way to escape the city limits? Will you try to instigate World War IV? Will you uplift the downtrodden? And how will you go about chasing any one of these or countless other objectives? A cult that worships you as a god could certainly help, but that comes with its own expectations and responsibilities thrust upon you. What about a group of child soldiers at your beck and call, or a shell company to generate wealth with which you can pay scientists to do your bidding? A multitude of paths spread across a multitude of points along the moral compass invite you down various narrative trees, all while exploring what it means to be an AI. Split your consciousness across multiple elite android models under your direct control, each with their own specializations, from combat to infiltration to intimidation. Develop robotics of your own, from towering mechs to semi-autonomous replicas. Capture enemy units for your own devices, and use all these tools to further your goals, whether through violence, subterfuge, peacekeeping, or other means entirely. Support all this with a solid economic backing, building structures at times hidden in existing human buildings, and at others making your presence known by building massive monoliths in plain sight, with each of these structures performing various tasks to keep your consciousness powered, computing at maximum capacity, and supplying you with crucial resources to keep building and recruiting units or to otherwise support whatever goals you're pursuing. And then, as with any 4X, there's a tech tree as well, but here this too is different, represented instead as your AI learning from the world around it. Contemplate the world, learn from failures and defeats, and face insurmountable challenges to unlock new ideas that help you overcome them. Hack enemy mechs, demoralize human soldiers, and engage in open combat featuring turn-based tactical battles that'll at times take into consideration positioning, and at others focus more on your foresight and ability to plan and equip your units in preparation for what's to come, sometimes even allowing you to pit factions against each other to save you the trouble. The way Heart of the Machine seeks to blend multiple genres is extremely compelling to me, and I love seeing these core 4X concepts get approached through an RPG lens. The game releases very soon, just at the end of this month, and it's got a very unique approach to some very interesting concepts that I think make it well worth checking out. Civilization VII is slated to release on the 11th of February, and it's probably the game on this list that needs the least introduction. But if you're completely new to the genre, at its core, the Civilization series has always been about leading a specific historical nation after picking a faction leader based on the specific benefits they provide, and then taking that nation on a procedurally generated map playing turn by turn to build cities, expand borders, recruit units, and go toe-to-toe with other factions in the pursuit of newer and newer technologies and world domination in one of many forms, be it military conquest, diplomacy, or something else. The Civilization series is a staple of the genre, and it's been around 6.5 years since Civilization VI released, with this new installment looking to bring some innovations with how it approaches some of the core tenets of the series that I just mentioned. Truth be told, some of these innovations here seem inspired by humankind, which I think is great. I found the latter's exploration of cultural development over ages to be particularly compelling, and I believe I've already stated repeatedly that I'd hoped it would inspire other historical 4X games to explore similar concepts, and here we are with Civilization VII putting its own spin on it, allowing you to choose a starting civilization and starting leader, and then evolving into different civilizations as you transition from one era to another, choosing based on your initial choice of nation and leader, as well as if you've met certain prerequisites in the prior age. This will make for a more dynamic game, and I'm curious to see how it feels in Civilization VII. Again, this is very different from one of the core tenets of this series. This feels very different when you compare it to the DNA of Civilization. But that's not the only thing that's changing here, of course. There are fundamental changes to how military units move around on the map, how cities sprawl and work with smaller towns, empire-wide benefits of certain resources, navigable rivers, and much, much more besides. 2024 had a handful of historical 4X games released, each trying to put its own spin on the genre, but Civ 7 is going to come through in early 2025 and quite possibly just set the bar again, maintaining most of its DNA while pushing the envelope in specific ways to give that breath of fresh air. I'm really curious to see how it all comes together. I've been playing Civilization games since I was literally a toddler, and the first game was the first I'd ever played, kicking off my love for strategy games, so I'm always excited by a new Civ game. Civ 5 took some time to grow on me once some of the major DLC dropped, and Civ 6 was a similar story. I see many people be cautiously excited or straight up worried for Civ 7, but everything I've seen has me pretty fully on board. The game looks like it's going to try some new things, and it's going to look absolutely gorgeous while doing so. I cannot wait to check it out when it releases on February 11th. Era 1 is slated to release on the 20th of February, and it's an absolutely gorgeous looking space sci-fi RTS with a large number of modular base building elements mixed in with a heavy homeworld feel to its combat, featuring ships across multiple classes with formation management, different weapon types, and classic RTS-style control systems spread across massive maps that you'll be able to dive into in multi and single player. A big standout feature is the modular approach to the main base, outposts, and massive warships, allowing you to build modules individually piece by piece, building your equipment from the ground up according to your needs across sensor modules, weapon modules of different types, research, power, crew, and production modules too, alongside special ability modules that'll do things like generate gravity wells or cloaks or help you jump through hyperspace. 6 degrees of freedom, 3-dimensional space combat, dynamic damage systems, and based on the UI, considerations for things like temperature, radiation, and detectability. It all looks like Era 1 is taking a very grounded and hard sci-fi approach to things, despite its more fantastical ship designs, and that's an easy way to pique my curiosity, with the tech tree being an interesting approach as well, relying on the collection of debris from destroyed enemy ships to help advance your own capabilities according to what you've collected. An abstraction, I suppose, of reverse engineering, which I find to be absolutely fascinating. Era 1 is doing a lot of interesting things and looking gorgeous while doing so. I can't wait to check it out in February. Commandos Origins is looking to release in March, and while I was initially quite skeptical of it, the demo has me convinced that Commandos might actually be back. The demo is still available to play, so if you're even remotely interested in real-time stealth tactics games, I'd highly recommend checking it out to make your own judgment call. The Commandos games have been around for a very long time, and this game is set as a prequel, taking you to the formation of the elite task force as it goes behind enemy lines during World War II, asking you to take on dangerous missions with a small group of experts, each with a unique set of skills that ask you to seek synergies between them as you face off against a variety of increasingly challenging circumstances. We'll keep an eye on enemy lines of sights and patrols as you plan your movements, diving from hiding spot to hiding spot, distracting people or pulling them away from their posts when possible, coordinating synchronized actions between the various members of your band of 6 unique characters, and Otherwise, hitting quick save and quick load repeatedly until those keys on your keyboard fall out. A lot of the quality of life improvements that Me games introduced with their games in the genre are present here, and I'm really glad to see that as Commandos is brought into this modern era of stealth tactics game. I'm excited by the prospect of multiple approaches to any single mission, and the prospect of multiplayer is certainly intriguing, though it's not the major selling point here for me personally. Commandos Origins is looking very good, and I can't wait to see more on the lead up to that March release date. Earth of Oryn is slated to release in Q1 of 2025, and it's looking like a game that could go in either direction of the city building and management versus strategic and tactical game divide, blending aspects of both sides of the fence with a gorgeous art style and a high level of customizability. Set in an alternate medieval world, the game puts you in charge of a kingdom to build and rule as you see fit, promising the usual dichotomy of benevolent king on one side and tyrannical despot on the other. There isn't too much new information about the game since it first pinged my radar, but it promises a lot of very interesting ideas that I can't wait to get my hands on. Buildings can either be built using prefabs or entirely customized using a very impressive building system that, apart from letting you visually design things as you want them, lets you also choose what materials are used for various considerations like durability and material costs. Then there's the option to use geared systems to power dynamic elements, which I always think is super cool, especially when you consider the water simulation elements that'll allow for water-powered systems. Apart from that, you're going to deal with resource gathering and production lines, trade, military considerations, technological advancements, health, crime, and the ability to create your own religion as well, all while exploring the world around you, discovering new kinds of wildlife and enemies alike, making decisions on branching paths that create a unique, replayable narrative experience across 4 main civilizations available at launch, each featuring unique biomes, strengths, and weaknesses to go with them. I'm very excited for Earth of Oryn, and I can't wait to see more as it prepares for its Q1 launch. Broken Arrow is coming out June 2025, and this is hands down one of the most exciting real-time strategy games slated for release this year. Inspired by the Eugen War Game series and Steel Division games, Broken Arrow is another modern warfare RTS that pits the US against Russia, asking you to field armor, air, infantry, artillery, and naval units across multiple single-player missions or in multiplayer in absolutely massive maps based on real-world locations featuring urban centers and the spaces between them, from small towns to fields and forests and industrial harbors and more. The demo from a while ago still acts as a great example, in my mind, of how Broken Arrow is looking to innovate on the formula, having the player take over one side of a strait before having to transport troops across the water using amphibious and air vehicles, landing atop a hill on the other side before pushing out to secure high-rises in preparation for naval support to arrive. The combined arms tactics, the variety of toys at play, and the scripted beats all came together very nicely, and if that's how single-player is going to be, I can see this filling a gap that other similar games ignore pretty much completely. There's a level of unit customization that its contemporaries don't explore either, making for another unique element of Broken Arrow, where you can adjust the details of your units to match your specific needs and playstyle according to how modern equipment is generally compatible with different weapon and armor packages. What I've seen so far is very promising, allowing you to change what kind of ammo your various units are carrying, or swapping in additional fuel tanks or countermeasures or sensors in place of heavier armor, so on and so forth. And when you spread this level of detail across the over 300 promised units, you can expect a huge variety of approaches depending on player taste and preferences. And as if all this wasn't enough, the scenario editor has got me extremely excited. It'll allow players to create custom missions, complete with visual scripting systems to trigger cutscenes and dialogue, meaning mods can include entire series of missions as storylines. I'm very curious to see this tool in action, as something like this can extend the single-player life of an RTS exponentially if done well. Broken Arrow has been one of my most anticipated games for a while now, and it remains tremendously exciting as it barrels towards its June release date. Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era is slated for Q2 of 2025, and I will always have high hopes for a new Heroes of Might and Magic game. Take charge of one of 6 varied, asymmetrically designed factions, ranging from the undead to the Fey folk to humans and more, and face off against the others in a non-linear single-player campaign, single player against the AI on pre-built and procedurally generated scenario maps, or in multiplayer against other players. The in-game scenario editor will allow for plenty of user-generated content as well, often providing the lifeblood and longevity for a game like this, featuring turn-based empire building and turn-based tactical combat in equal measure, alongside heavy RPG elements. Lead your heroes across the global map and its many biomes to collect resources and artifacts to grow stronger. Build up your castle and expand your kingdom, and engage in turn-based battles on hex-based maps featuring standard attacks as well as active abilities for your various units and heroes, asking you to consider status effects, attack patterns and ranges, and the general layout of the battlefield, coupled with magic that you can cast from on high to tip engagements in your favor from time to time. I'm sure we'll learn a lot more on the lead up to launch, but for the time being, this is looking like a reliable return to the series with gorgeous visuals and a mix of the old and new in good measure. I can't wait to check it out in Q2 of this year. MENACE is slated for release in Q3 of 2025, and this is the next game from the devs of Battle Brothers, the punishing, genre-defining turn-based tactical RPG from a handful of years ago. Set in the distant future, you lead a group of Marines to a star system that has recently been cut off from the core, tasked with bringing order among disparate factions, seeking relations with them where possible to gain access to additional equipment and units, but otherwise needing to keep them in check as you try to reconnect the system with the core. In the midst of all this, a new threat rises in the system, and that changes the complexion of the situation as things start to hit the fan. The game maintains the character focus of Battle Brothers by giving you squad leaders to take care of, with some in charge of infantry squads and others in charge of vehicles of one kind or another, from tanks to walkers. These squad leaders will build relationships over time, leveling up and unlocking new perks, though there is of course a chance that you'll lose them along the way as well, and each new game will pick a handful from a pool, meaning multiple different attempts at the game will feature different combinations of these characters. The strategic layer will have you bouncing around from planet to planet, featuring different environment types and biomes, dealing with different factions, upgrading your ship to provide additional support, and otherwise allowing you to kit out your squads with equipment you've either arrived at the system with or otherwise acquired locally. Take morale into consideration as you choose your targets on the battlefield. Position your troops, keeping their weapons' damage and accuracy over distance in mind. Use suppression to tip the balance. Throw smoke grenades to block lines of sight. Call in air support. The tactical level is full of the familiar as well as the new, bringing the battlefield to life and introducing real-world considerations that many of these games ignore. Between the strategic and tactical layers sits the operational layer, where each larger mission is subdivided into smaller submissions, represented as these tactical battles that are connected by branching paths, leading you from start to finish, allowing you to choose a path that best suits your capabilities and needs. Will you divert your attention to eliminate potential enemy reinforcements in a future engagement or acquire additional equipment? Or will you beeline towards the end goal of any given mission? There's a lot of cool stuff going on here, and I can't wait to show more of it as it gets revealed over the course of the year, nearing that Q3 release date. I absolutely loved Battle Brothers, and I can't wait to get my hands on MENACE. Grit and Valor 1949 is simply slated for release in 2025, and I got to spend some time with its closed beta before the end of last year, convincing me that this is one to keep an eye on. The game features real-time grid-based mech battles with roguelike elements as you push back against a very successful Nazi Germany that's managed to all but win World War II. A simple rock-paper-scissors system is made extremely intense and punishing as you try to manage the classes of mechs available to you against the classes of enemies coming to attack them as you go from procedurally generated node to procedurally generated node on an overworld map featuring one of 4 regions of the world, going from region to region in the hopes of liberating various parts of the world to overcome the enemy once and for all. A lot of the familiar tropes of the genre are present. Some nodes in the overworld map represent combat missions, while others provide events or opportunities to repair or upgrade your units for the ongoing run, or to otherwise gain an advantage in upcoming missions or even future runs. And should you lose all your units, you'll be punted back to HQ to refurbish, refit, research, and try again from the beginning. All these aspects of the game are well made, but what really made it stand out was the real-time approach to what is typically done turn-based. While the battlefields are relatively small, You'll find yourself frantically ordering the 3 or so mechs under your command around from corner to corner as you try to protect your mobile HQ, grabbing pickups that buff your mechs and unlock new abilities for the run, keeping in mind the aforementioned rock, paper, scissors balancing act while also keeping an eye on special abilities, height advantages, cover, secondary objectives, and much more besides. This is the kind of game that can easily be expanded on, but what's already there is extremely addictive without being overcomplicated. I'm excited to see what the devs are cooking up beyond that closed beta I participated in last year, and I can't wait for this game to release. Mars Tactics is slated for release sometime in 2025, bringing us a very exciting turn-based tactics game centered around a labor uprising on the Red Planet. There are some very fresh mechanics being introduced here that I'm particularly excited for beyond the fun sci-fi setting and the extremely asymmetric factions that each focus on what powers the two different sides of such a conflict. Cold hard cash and investor-backed mercenaries on one, and the heart and soul of blue-collar workers on the other. The strategic layer is where the asymmetry starts, with researching technologies, managing production chains, organizing shipments from Earth, and of course, recruiting individuals to your cause and watching them obtain new skills through their actions, managing their equipment to match their strengths and weaknesses. The planet is divided into a grid-based map, with each square representing a potential persistent battlefield where any damage done in the turn-based tactical layer on said square will have a direct impact on the strategic layer, like impacting building output, and all that damage will be there should you revisit that square in a future battle too. Beyond that, providing support between grid tiles is a major aspect of the strategic layer, where reinforcements will arrive on the battlefield from the side of the battlefield that they're actually on, should you want them to, either on foot or by air, or in the form of off-map support, if you've secured any. Apart from all this, the battlefield itself has some very special ideas on display, with core mechanics that really change the tactical layer. For example, the maps are completely destructible. You won't just be bringing down buildings with airstrikes and grenades though, you'll also be able to literally destroy the environment with your weapons, chipping away at hills or digging trenches with the help of explosives, diving into them for cover that didn't previously exist, or destroying cover that your enemy was relying on. What's more, hit chances aren't purely calculated based on dice rolls, though chance obviously does still feature in the process. Instead, each gun has stats that determine how many rounds it fires with any given firing action, what the spread of said fire is, and what the damage is per round that lands. Then it simulates these ballistics, meaning hit chances are modified by actual lines of sight, angles of fire, and more, giving each weapon a personality without relying on tags or classifications to determine if a weapon will, for example, cause suppression or not. There are some really awesome ideas here, mixed with a vibrant art style, a compelling setting, and a great overall sense of style. I cannot wait for this one later this year. Beyond Astra is slated for release in 2025, and it has piqued my curiosity with its demo. A 4X space sci-fi game, you'll participate in all the familiar aspects of the genre. Design your own ships to go out and fight in 3D space, meet new factions, and engage in diplomacy and trade, so on and so forth. But there are a few standout elements that got me interested here in particular. Most importantly, the game lets you transition between space and planet surface gameplay seamlessly, allowing you to build up your colonies and exploit them for their resources as you recruit ground warfare units and manage the needs of the local populace, all while building your space fleet to expand beyond your initial homeworld as well. This introduces new unit types in orbital units like satellites that can be used to support ground combat or turn their attention against invading spaceships as well. And beyond that, this introduces an additional layer of construction in the form of space stations as well, and it engages them in a way that I don't think I've seen other 4X games do. Multiple skill trees to explore alongside a large tech tree and a huge variety of resources alongside concerns about culture, religion, politics, pollution, and more should all provide some very good variety across multiple runs, but it's that core element where you concern yourself with planetary operations just as much as space operations that I think really makes Beyond Astra stand out amongst 4X competitors, has me really interested in checking it out later this year. Fragile Existence is also slated for 2025 and shares a tiny bit of overlap with Beyond Astra in that this is also a space sci-fi game where you need to concern yourself with operations in space and planetside. But apart from that, it looks to provide a completely unique experience as a space RTS with base building and fleet management elements instead. I don't think I've seen any other game quite do this, putting you in charge of a flotilla that represents the last survivors of humanity and asking you to escape a ceaseless predator that intends to hunt you through countless star systems. You'll be tasked with harnessing as many resources as possible at every new system you arrive on, working quickly to colonize and exploit the planets, using what they have on offer to strengthen and advance your capabilities, hoping to one day overpower the existential threat that chases you and establish a new home. You'll need to coordinate operations between the ground, orbit, and space beyond and between planets as you probe for resources, establish bases, and secure supply trains featuring physicalized resources that actually need to be moved from point to point to be of any use, making positioning and coordination of utmost importance in a race against the inevitable. I've covered Fragile Existence in depth on my channel before, and you can learn more about it by watching the video linked under the eye in the top right corner right now. I'm very excited for this one, and it's not only trying something unique in this space, but it's coming with a scenario editor that allow players to build their own planets, systems, and even storylines with a visual editor directly in-game. And you've heard me say this a couple of times in this video already, but that just adds so much longevity to a game. I cannot wait to see how it works. Drill Keeper is another one slated for 2025, blending roguelike deck building elements with tower defense gameplay in a sci-fi setting way in the future, where you work in service of a giant corporation looking to extract resources from around the universe with the help of your trusty, upgradable planetary drill. Take it with you from one procedurally generated planet to another, exploring new dig sites with each run, facing off against unique challenges and enemies based on the planet in question. At the start of your run, you'll be able to customize your deck of cards. That's what you use to build and upgrade structures or use abilities when you're actually digging. You'll also be able to choose from a handful of heroes to play as, each with their own abilities determined by their faction and who they are specifically, resulting in wildly different playstyles on a faction level with minor variances on a sub-faction level, introducing a lot of replayability and varied approaches to match varied playstyles. As a run continues, you'll unlock cards to bolster your options in the interest of protecting your drill. See, when you arrive at a dig site, everything around you is destructible, and you can dig manually to carve out parts of the map and acquire the gold used to play your cards or the resources needed to unlock meta progression elements instead. Or you can dig to find chests containing unlocks like more cards, and they can help you get your run further along. Or you can stumble upon environmental elements that'll either help or hinder your cause. Eventually, when you've dug as much as you can manually, you'll need to turn the drill on. Doing so awakens the local fauna as they leap to the defense of their planet, and they'll follow the most direct path from where they originate to your drill, and your digging can provide them with alternate paths to follow instead. Meanwhile, the cards you play will allow you to place barriers, traps, and defensive structures, typically weapons. Coordinating the paths you build and the equipment you draw is crucial, as matching attack patterns to pathing patterns will make a key difference, and you can use the environment to your advantage as you face off against multiple waves with fresh draws and rounds of manual digging between each wave. Fully exploit the planet, then move on to the next, and the next, and the next. Drill Keeper has some really fun ideas alongside its beautiful pixel art aesthetic, and I look forward to showing more of it off on the channel as it targets its 2025 release date. Gilded Destiny is slated for 2025, and it's looking like an absolutely wonderful addition to the grand strategy space, taking place during the Industrial Revolution and putting you in charge of one of many nations of the time and setting you loose to rewrite history. While it shares a lot of similarities with Victoria 3, there are some key differentiators that should help fill the gap left behind for fans of certain aspects of Victoria 2, while generally aiming to provide a very deep simulation of intertwining elements for endless replayability focused around the challenges of the era. Modernization, social pressures, economic pressures, colonization, so on and so forth, representing individual members of your citizenry, their culture, faith, habits, economic status, and relevant personal interests as far as policies and goods are concerned too. You'll manage the production of said goods to meet demands, arranging the logistics of moving them, organizing trade deals as needed, keeping an eye on prices and tariffs, and ensuring your people's needs are not just being met, but affordably so. You'll go to war, directly commanding your armies on a hex-based global map to further your interests in this time of great change, and you'll manage great personalities to lead your people to the age as politicians, generals, academics, and more. Gilded Destiny looks like a great grand strategy title coming built from the ground up with modding in mind, and so I, for multiple reasons, Cannot wait for it to release later this year, and I might do a deep dive features highlight video in the future. If you're interested, let me know in the comments below. Espiocracy is targeting a 2025 release date as another great new grand strategy game, this time focused on the shadowy world of espionage, starting from the Cold War, going right up to the modern day. You'll be able to pick from a large number of secret services around the world to further your goals through the use of agents, planning and executing operations to infiltrate everything from government agencies to pop culture, building relationships among people, developing new technologies, and needing to keep an eye out for spies in your own backyard as you deal with nuclear brinkmanship, proxy wars, foreign interests, and turncoats alike. Worry about your people's personal biases as you assign them tasks. Keep an eye out for worrying cliques and subgroups, and sway political parties, guerrilla forces, and trade unions to impact policies and actions across borders. The dev diaries have been showing a lot of the game mechanics in action, and I'm almost done my deep dive video I've been planning for a while. There's just so much to talk about, and it's been taking a minute to pull it all together and organize it all. I love the era and subject matter, and Espiocracy looks like it's going to do absolute wonders for the grand strategy genre. I cannot wait for the game to release. Falling Frontier is still aiming for its 2025 release date after a couple of delays, and this space sci-fi RTS continues to be one of my most anticipated games since I first came across it. Apart from the narrative campaign that spans a massive expanse for players to lose themselves in, it'll come with a scenario editor that should allow players to build their own experiences to share as well. And apart from slowly revealing ship designs that fit the grounded, hard sci-fi universe, the developer is now hard at work building up how space stations look and operate, tying into a vast logistics and supply chain system, as well as considerations of electronic warfare, stealth, and, of course, resource acquisition and production capabilities. Apart from the cinematic approach and god-tier visuals, the systems weaving it all together are what make Falling Frontier such an exciting prospect. Customize faction-specific ship chassis by altering internal modules to gain access to better electronic warfare options, speed, jump distance, etc., and then customize weapon hardpoints to a great degree as well, choosing between different combinations of turret bases and guns to create different conditions during battle, like damage output, sure, armor penetration, sure, but also target acquisition speed, and other much more complex elements that most games in the genre don't even bother to model. You'll be choosing different kinds of munitions and adding in point defense systems to keep your own ships safe from enemy salvos, and as you're making all of these adjustments, you have to take into consideration the cost of building and keeping the ship in question operational. Each ship needs fuel to move at full speed, and it needs to keep munitions in its stores if it wants to actually fire its weapons during combat. In order to maintain all of this, you need to either have supply ships bringing fuel and munitions over, alongside food for the crew of the ship of course, or you'll need stations spread out where ships can dock to resupply. But if you do that, you'll still have to make sure that you're providing these stations with said supplies. So, all of a sudden, shipping lines become especially important to defend, as the physicalized resources of the game means that resources have to be transported to where repairs and resupply and manufacturing is actually happening. There's no teleporting resources here. You'll also be dealing with planet-side construction and improvements while recruiting officers to actually operate your vessels, each with different traits, strengths, and weaknesses. Find and intercept enemy fleets based on signature sizes, hide your own among nebula or in radar shadows of celestial bodies, bomb entire planets, and otherwise engage in space warfare like few other games, if any, have previously allowed. I cannot wait for Falling Frontier. There are a few other games I'm keeping an eye on that don't currently have a solid release date, but might still see the light of day sometime in 2025. I'll keep these brief, but will likely come back to these games with focused videos down the line when they have more concrete dates. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to get notified when they release. Sanctuary Shattered Sun looks like a very exciting sci-fi RTS with an absolutely massive scale with up to 10,000 units at the player's fingertips, alongside super weapons that can literally modify the massive 40 by 40 kilometer large battlefields by cracking holes in the planet or changing the weather to alter the strategic situation of an engagement. A demo is coming soon, and I can't wait to get hands-on. Anvil Empires is the medieval follow-up from the folks that brought us Foxhole. The medieval MMO will allow thousands of players to face off in a persistent open world where the players are truly in control of the ebb and flow of conflict. Build up settlements from little hamlets to fortresses using a modular building system, work cooperatively with other members of the kingdom, and, if not fighting, provide support in the form of logistics, building supply camps and maintaining logistics lines to provide the soldiers with food, weapons, and a place to rest, or building siege camps to provide siege ladders and battering rams for the inevitable assaults on the castles that'll dot the map. The dev diaries have been very promising so far, and I can't wait to learn more. Empire Eternal reminds me of some of my favorite RTS games, featuring a huge spread of historical eras, taking your empire from the Stone Age through to the modern era. We haven't seen too much just yet, but the premise is exciting, and as a huge fan of Empire Earth back in the day in particular, I can't wait to learn more here. The game is looking solid from a purely visual standpoint, and I hope to see more dev diaries over the course of 2025. I'll be keeping an eye on this one for sure. The Scouring is another upcoming RTS, this one harkening back to the OG Warcraft days with its humans versus orcs dichotomy. The game looks very vibrant and fast-paced, and just overall feels like it could be a good time in single and multiplayer with up to 8 players, as it tasks you with leading either side from on high, with the addition of some ARPG elements as you can take control of your heroes, equipping them and using their abilities to tilt battles in your favor. A demo is slated for early in the year, and I'll be curious to see how this feels in action. Warhammer 40k Mechanicus 2 looks like it'll expand on everything its predecessor did well, which is quite a lot considering it was one of the best turn-based tactics games this IP has ever seen. Mechanicus 2 will feature single-player campaigns from the perspective of the two massively asymmetrical factions that featured in the previous title. One, a millennia-old empire of robots that were in a peaceful stasis until you arrived in the previous game and disturbed their slumber, and the other being the more machine-than-man tech-loving perpetrators of said disturbance. I'm curious to see what other innovations the game will bring with it. The previous game introduced dungeon crawling as a representation of your faction crawling through tombs and triggering more dangers over time, but here it sounds like the fighting will take place both below and above ground, with at least one screenshot showcasing a planetary strategic layer featuring regions and points of interest, with a day counter next to a play and fast forward button that implies a real-time campaign layer. Either way, I'm excited to learn more. See anything you like? Make sure you go and wishlist it on Steam, and don't hesitate to leave a like on this video to help spread the word on these games too. Keep your eyes peeled for my city building and management focused video coming shortly, but until then, as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly, and of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.